Welcome to IDP Web Experiment. Let's do a review of design thinking. In our first class, we talk about the iteration where you do empathy, prototype, and evaluate. In design thinking, there is 5 steps. So the empathy is both empathize and define. The prototype would be you ideate first, then you prototype, and then you test. That would be evaluation. So in empathy, it is a human-centered design. The focus is on users, the customers. And we use 3 methods: passive observation, interactive engagement using interviews, opening questions and all that, and immersion being the user and experiencing what the user experienced. And there are a few techniques for this. You can either use apprentice method or use lead users. Then you define, you collect all the data that you have, the findings from the empathy, and you look for insights, patterns that can help you produce your personas and scenarios and how it focuses on solving the goal. More on analysis. In software design, we call this system requirements gathering analysis first before you even do the design. And once you get enough insights, for example, if you look at urban planning, people like sitting space, eating space, so you design more common space with those kinds of features. Similar with the software, so you look for the types of user interface, the kind of laws that helps you figure out closer things should be related, things should be closer together, and so on. And from all these insights, you look for a direction, a vision, a point of view. And this point of view is important because at the end, it helps you focus so that you don't go around in different types of tangents on your insights. Then you brainstorm. This is the design stage of your system analysis and design. So you do ideation, you want to be creative, you set the mindset so that everybody has opportunity to give ideas about what is important and what do they want, and you try to avoid cookie cut standard ideas. You look for game changer types, you generate ideas from diverse perspective. Then you prototype. You do quick early prototypes in what we call the low fidelity type prototype. So you fail quickly, you fail often so that you can learn more, you get a sweet spot, and you build on top of that, and you go back again, maybe you ideate again, and then you prototype again. And then lastly, you test. This is part of empathy as well, because you want to get the user reaction and you gain more insights. There are different types of testing, and we'll cover that next. So in the test, you learn from the users and you refine your design and you continue from there. And you can use inspection, which is a low-hanging fruit. You get experts to come and do the test. There are several advantages of using experts. When we say expert, we mean in the UI domain, in the user experience domain. So these experts understand that you are testing user interface, a IT interface, a app or a website or whatever, and they can help you get feedback quickly. They use the human computer theory, where they pretend to be the user and they try to ask 4 questions in cognitive walkthrough, or they use heuristics that have been covered in many well-known UX experts like Jacob Nielsen on his 10 heuristics. However, there is a drawback in inspection, and the inspection drawback is you are not testing with real users. So you can either go to the field itself and test with real user, but also you have this drawback of not controlling the environment. So you go to the lab, you bring them to the lab and you do the test there. It's more precise there, but then it's kind of expensive. It takes up more time and you need to set up the environment and to get more precision testing. So you can also do surveys if you are further into your design and you want to fine-tune your design. You can specifically ask certain questions. There are different kinds of surveys, questions you can ask, and it can be quick. You can even ask them to to pretend and see answer certain questions based on that, or you can ask them to test your system and then ask some survey questions based on that. And we will do that in iteration 2. And that is the summary of the design thinking. So you can iterate from all 5 steps all over again, empathize again, and then redefine idea and all that. Or if you've done enough empathy, you can actually go ideate and prototype again, or just test and prototype, or prototype and ideate. So there are different types of iteration you can do. It's not necessarily all through 5 steps all over again. So here is an idea of showing you where all the different types of testing lies in being obstructive or unobstructive, being theoretical or empirical. So we're going to talk about web experiment here, and these are the content. This is version 1 of the National Alert Registry in the US. So in the US, if you are a convicted sex criminal, you need to register yourself when you move to a city, and anyone can go into this website and buy information about who are the sex offenders that are in your area. Imagine that in Singapore, it would your HDB price could go down quite drastically. Imagine you have a sex predator living next to you. Quite a bad thing. Anyways, let's move to version B, and you can see the difference between A and B. And you see there are very little difference here. So they have some highlight in yellows, some very signs spot, some credit card, and some ways of inputting device. And then let's look at version C. Version C is even more drastic than B. So from A, which is the current stage, you want to move to B, which is not very big difference from A, or you can move to C. Look at C. There's a lot more changes in C. It's in 2 columns. It has a lot more separations of the neighborhood report versus a sample report. And you look at the bottom part, the comments and so on. So which would you do? If you are given this choice, you are the product manager of this website and your current version is A, and you want to go to B and C. So they did a A/B test, or in this case BC test, and you collect certain metrics, and here are some metrics that you collect in order to see if B is better or C is better. So it is important to come up with the right metrics. So there are 3 metrics here: percentage of traffic, new sales, and change. So A, you will get 34%, B will get 33%, C will get 33%. So it's quite evenly spread out. And you look at how many sales there are in A, B, and C. It's quite surprising. C actually has reduction, which is 50%, more than 50% less than the current version. So C is bad. So what is the lesson learned here? Small changes can have big impact. You see increase by 15%, and big changes can have even a drastic impact that you may not be expecting. So the other lesson here is we can't predict. We don't know which one is better. So in the previous class, I asked the student, how many of you think B is better? How many of you think C is better? And you'll be surprised. More people tell me that C is better because it's more compact and all that. And most of the time they got it wrong. So we won't do it to you guys. So these are some of the criteria that can cause C to be worse. The position, the color, the white space, the columns, the visual stuff. So the takeaway here is do tests. It's important. We can't predict what users will do, so test is important. So let's look at a few other examples. Expedia is a website for you to buy a hotel room or a tour package or a flight. So here they have, when you are paying out, they have a text box that says company. What does that company means? Is it the company that you are paying this with, or is this the company that is your credit card or something like that? So if you have something that's confusing, removing it can actually make a big difference. So in this case, they remove it and they increase the profit by $12 million. That's a small change can has big impact, and data analytics is important for you to understand what works and what don't work. So another concern is if you have a champion or if you have a manager and they have an opinion, you always follow the HIPPO opinion. What's HIPPO stands for highest paid person's opinion, HIPPO. So this actual case in Amazon shopping cart, Great Learning wanted to put this thing before somebody check out a list of recommendations of books that they have selected. What are the same books that other people who have bought that book would have selected and you want to recommend. So what's the pro of this? That you can sell more books. What's the con of this? It can distract. Maybe one of the recommendation has a cheaper version, or maybe now they can't decide, they decide not to buy. So the HIPPO, the senior vice president, says stop the project. But before he actually stopped, he did a simple experiment and was wildly successful, and he used the data to convince management to use this, and the history tells you now you can see a lot of website use recommendation for cross-selling, increase sales. So here's another problem with thing that you can get out of A/B testing. So there are two tests here. This is a food care for doctor where you buy food care products. So if you look at A and B, there are a few differences. First difference is the continue shopping. It doesn't have continue shopping in B. Second difference is you have an update button in A, but you don't have. It automatically update. Third, you see a discount versus a no discount version. And then fourth is a coupon code. And lastly, you have a recalculate. Now, the problem with this is you have too many changes between A and B. And when you have too many changes between A and B, your A/B test, you can't tell which of these changes are affecting it. So the result from this is upgrading from A to B actually lost 90%. And why? Guess which one of these change actually caused more of a drastic issue? And that is number 4, coupon code. How many of you go to a website like Shopee or Amazon or AliExpress or Rema or somewhere else, and he asks you for a coupon and you have no coupon? What do? Wow, I'm not buying it at full price. Let me go search the web for a coupon. I can't find a coupon. No, let me wait for 8/8 or 11/11 before I buy my stuff. So they end up not buying. So maybe you don't want to have the coupon code. So that was the one change that can drastically remove it. Okay, so small change, avoid multiple changes. That's important because some small change can have big impact, and data trumps intuition. The next few slides, we're going to show some examples with some videos. So let's look at the next example. We will look at 2 videos of small changes that can have big effect. One is by Facebook, by changing something from announce to invite. The other one is by Uber, by changing something that allows you to do credit card in order to complete a transaction to no credit card.
We were not as big as the local competitor in Japan at the time. I think they were called Mixi. When we dug into the metrics in Japan, we noticed that most people were not inviting their friends. And when we compared the conversion rates in Japan versus in other parts of the world, there was a big drop-off occurring in Japan on that invite step. And when we dug into it and talked with our country manager in Japan and the team there, they said, it's just a cultural thing. It's rude. It's considered rude to invite people to a new thing like this. And that's why everyone's skipping that step. And so what we did, it was actually a fairly minor tweak. Instead of calling them invites, we called them announcements. And we said, now that you've signed up for Facebook, why don't you let Facebook announce to all of your friends that you're now on Facebook and this is where they can find you? And suddenly everyone started saying, sure, I'll let Facebook announce this to all of my friends. And just by changing the wording, it was more culturally accepted And Japan went from one of our slowest growing countries to one of our fastest growing countries. And shortly after that, we surpassed our local competitor in Japan.
So this is a good example of a real life situation where when you ask somebody to change something to improve growth, it doesn't have to be a major change. It can be through this test, the cultural acceptance issue that can make it better.
We decided to run a test in Hyderabad, India, where we said, let's let riders request their first ride without putting a credit card number in. In fact, we were told by our CEO not to run that test because he felt so strongly against it. But we had so much conviction it would make a big difference that we secretly ran the test just as a small experiment. And when we got the data back, it had doubled conversion rate to paid first trip. And then when we shared that data with Travis, he said, I hate you guys, but I love you guys. This is amazing. And we rolled that out in a lot of other countries as well. But it was removing that barrier of entering the credit card number and allowing riders to pay in cash just allowed so many more people to get through the funnel.
So here's another example, real life example, and Travis, the CEO, is the hippo that didn't want them to run, but they collect the data, so data trumps intuition.
Advertiser growth for Facebook, we created a new button so that you could buy an ad directly from a post. The button originally said promote. The mistake we made was that we were thinking about it like an ad, but the companies or the small business owners did not know what that meant. I was like, look at this amazing new thing. And they were like, what is a promote? I don't understand what you're talking about. So then we changed it to say boost post. It increased the people buying ads by 17%.
Wow.
So just changing the word on the button was a 17% increase.
So again, this is another example of small change with big impact. So from promote to boost post makes a big difference. Changing how you phrase a sentence in a website or a mobile app makes a big difference. So the lexicon makes a big difference. So let's look at an example here. Apple says personalized ad. I can help you to personalize ad. And it needs to collect data to do that. Do you allow us to give you a personalized ad? Versus something like what it says when Meta tried to collect an app. It says, Facebook is trying to track your activities. Would you allow them or ask them not to track? So that makes a big difference. So A/B testing can help you test your lexicon the way you phrase it. We want to look at how to do A/B testing well. One of the methods to do is to use randomized control experiments. So you have two websites here and you don't do too many changes. In this case, the learn more button on the left is blue and the right is red. And you want to know the difference. So that's first thing we covered earlier. Don't have too many changes. So you do a simple randomized test. You break it up so that equal number of people do A and B. So 50% in A and 50% in B. We call one the control condition, which is the existing system. We do one called the treatment condition, which is the alternative design. And this is done in medicine all the time when they do pharmaceutical tests for drugs. You use a placebo versus you use a actual vaccination or a real drug test. And then you collect the data and you see which one is better. So a very common big test that people have done is during the COVID time, they look at the efficacy of a drug, a vaccination drug. So when they say the efficacy is 80% or 90% or 95%, what does it really mean? So you have the placebo and the vaccinated group. So the placebo, you have 100 people test it, and out of the 100 people who test it, 10 people still gets COVID. Whereas the vaccinated group, you have 100 people test it, and only 2% got COVID. And out of the 2% compared to the 10%, you have a 80% reduction. And that is what we mean by 80% efficacy. Next, we will look at designing the test. An important part of your test is to collect the data to see which one is better, A or B. So how do you get valuable insights? there are various ways of collecting success metrics and goals. So a very common one in UI is conversion rate, the percentage of users who perform the desired action. So in our case, it could be conversions, whether they buy your product. It could be the total time they spend on shopping or transaction or performing the data or understanding the data. And there are macro and micro conversions. So let's listen to what is a macro conversion versus a micro conversion.
Conversion rate measures what percentage of your users complete significant actions that you want them to take. But an important limitation of conversion rate is that sometimes your most important conversions are actually pretty rare events. Imagine that you have a web application which allows users to share photos, and there's both a free account and a paid version of the service. The act of upgrading to the paid version might be your most important conversion in terms of generating revenue. But if that action happens only once for each user, there won't be many data points to analyze, which makes it more difficult to detect changes in that metric over time. So a good approach is to identify both significant conversions, such as upgrading, which can be described as macro conversions, and less momentous but more frequent actions, which can be described as micro conversions. For example, if you know that people who upload a lot of photos are more likely to upgrade, the act of uploading a photo would be a good micro conversion to track. Even though it doesn't generate revenue directly, if the act of uploading happens more often, there are a lot more data points, and that will make it easier to detect trends in whether the action is becoming more or less frequent as you implement changes to the design. So your best bet is to identify and track both macro conversions and several different micro conversions. This approach gives you immediate feedback about specific design changes and will also enable you to predict longer-term results without waiting for infrequent data to accumulate.
So in designing for your project A/B testing, you need to understand what are the good macro conversion, which are usually easier because it's straightforward, what you want them to buy something and the action. But if it's very rarely occurring, you need to look for more micro conversions data to collect. So here is an exercise, and we're looking for conversion rate for somebody to buy a book, and you work for Amazon and you want to know what are some of the macro or micro conversions. So decide, go look at that, and what would be a good macro conversion. So a good macro conversion you would think is somebody add this to a cart. Even better, somebody check out the book from the cart. What are micro conversions that you might look at? Micro conversions might be, hey, did they actually read, look inside, click on it to look inside? Did they actually look at the price in different areas, other sellers? Those are more frequent things than just buying immediately. So some people may not go and buy, they may search around first before that happens. So the checkout will be a macro conversion. And over time, you may want to do other micro conversions as well. Another important thing about A/B testing is getting the right sample population. You divide it to 50-50% and you randomly choose which 50-50 goes in there. And it's important to be random here, okay? So you cannot have all the people do A in the morning and all the people do B in the afternoon, because that would be a confounding variable that can influence the way they decide, because maybe waking up early is not a likely thing to do when you want to buy something or so on. So another important thing about the sample population is the number of minimum size of the population that you want, because the more people you need to test with, the more expensive it gets. So what is the minimum size that is good enough for your sample? So it depends on a few things. There's no one solution here. So if you're doing statistical analysis, there is a magic number like 30 in order to get the statistical power. But then there are other issues as well. If you're looking for big differences, then smaller number is fine. You're looking for small differences, very minute differences, you have a very mature system software out there, and you're just looking whether they like a small change in color or positioning, then you may need more people to find out the differences between them. When you test your A/B with a real product out there, when you will go out and work for Shopee and you are the UX experience designer and you are testing this with real user, it can be very dangerous, because if you redesign something, it can actually put off some users and they may never come back again. So it is important to know if your change is going to have a drastic effect. So there are a few ways to combat this. One is to ramp up, slowly ramp up. Don't do two all at once. And if you find something of a big problem, you auto abort. If the few people that you tested all decide not to buy after you made the change, you auto abort and not do the test. Next is UX tools. There are many UX tools out there. We have no time to cover all of them. In fact, we are not going to cover any of them. We're just going to recommend a few. So SMU Quadrix, we have already have license for Quadrix using your email account. And if you've taken some social science or economics or behavioral psychology class, you may have already done some surveys. You know how to use Quadrix. There's always a recommendation to use Quadrix. But there are some limitations on Quadrix. So we also recommend Loop 11, which is a actual UI test, and we'll talk about that in a little while. There are others in that list here. So Quadrix, as mentioned earlier, is free to SMU, and you can do multiple choice screen surveys, but there are limited things you can do with it. They still have a test for A/B testing. So in an A/B test, you can actually assign a randomizer so that it would randomly assign to different groups of people on whether it will use A or B. Loop 11 is more of a UX type of test where you can give the Loop 11 a URL, and it will tell you, it will show it to the user that you are testing it with and to perform a task. Now, the thing about Loop 11 is you have a 14-day trial, but there is an academic license that we will have, which give you enterprise subscription as long as you use the SMU account. You can perform more tasks here. So here you pass it an actual URL, so the URL will come out and it will perform a task. It even allows you to use the camera so that you can record what's happening. But a lot of people may not want the camera to turn on, so don't use the camera unless it helps you perform certain issues and you're collecting a metrics that is important, a micro or macro metrics. And once they are done, they can either task complete, or sometimes click a button in your website, it goes to the next page, and that is all it collects. Another good thing about Loop 11 is it collects the time it takes you to perform a task, and that is a good micro conversion that you want to collect in a lot of the tests that we have done. So Maze is another example. User Zoom is another example tools. So let's talk about the different types of tests. Web analytics is one type of test that you can do. A lot of professionals out there do, and what they do is they wrote code or they use tools like Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, or Open Web Analytics that is together attached working with their deployed system, and it collects information about how much time somebody spent on your web page, and in each web page from where they come from, different parts of the country based on their IP address, and how long they view your page and sessions, and whether they click certain things. Let's summarize the valuable insight that you want to collect for your project. Here are some advice that we give you for this IS211 project, IDP project. So focus on only the most important change. You only do A/B test is expensive, so don't do tests on too many things, because too many things you can't tell which small things that can have the biggest effect. So you want to focus on the most important change. Okay, could be a color, it could be a position, but it has to be a color or position on the thing that is the most important, the button or the word or the item photos or whatever. Okay, now you don't want to have too many independent changes between A and B, so small changes have big impact, and you don't want to do the most obvious one. If something is very obvious that the previous design have very bad color schemes and you want to change the color, if those are obvious, just change it. You don't even need to do an A/B test. Make the task very realistic. Don't ask them to do a task that is made up, that's not very clear. Besides A/B test, there's another test called multivariate test. Remember, we asked you not to change too many things. If you have more than one change, you can use something else called a multivariate test. The problem with multivariate tests is there are combinations of multiple tests, and you have to test out each of these combinations, and there are depending on how many changes you have, can be exponential. So let's listen to
You've probably
this talk.
heard of A/B testing, a design optimization method that uses analytics data to determine which version of a design has the most desirable impact on user behavior. But you may not be familiar with a similar design optimization method, multivariate testing. These two methods have a lot in common. They both involve splitting up live visitor traffic between different design variations in order to test their impact. They both measure which design option has the best impact on conversions. However, the key difference between these two methods comes down to what you can use them for. For example, with A/B testing, you might compare two different landing pages. Each landing page might have different images, content, and call to action text. Let's say that you split your traffic between these two versions, and you find that version B of this landing page results in more conversions than version A. Well, that tells you that version B works better than version A, but you may not really know why. Was it the image in version B that had the most impact on users, the content, the call to action text, or some combination of those variables? Here's where multivariate testing can have an advantage. In multivariate testing, you test every possible combination of the different UI elements that you're considering changing. So let's say you're considering changing the image and the call to action text on a landing page. If you're running a multivariate test, you'll test every possible combination of those different variables. That way we can determine which change or which combination of changes will have the greatest impact. Really useful, right? So why is A/B testing so much more popular than multivariate testing? Well, because every new combination of UI elements you add is a different variation that you have to test. So that means rather than splitting your traffic 50-50, you might have to split up your traffic much more. Unless your site or app is blessed with very high traffic, that likely means you'll have to run a multivariate test for a longer amount of time in order to reach statistical significance. And for some teams, that makes multivariate testing unusable. If you have the option, consider reserving multivariate testing for use only when you're trying to refine and perfect the details in an already functional design.
So A/B testing is a lot more popular because you need more users to test on a multivariate testing. So in your project, if you have to look at the differences, multiple differences, you do need to have tests on each of these combinations to be more accurate on getting the results that you want. So in class, we will do a web experiment exercise, and you are supposed to choose a goal in your A/B test, collect the right data, ask them to perform the actual task, and be very specific about the task, and who are you going to recruit and what environment you're going to use it for. Here's the summary reading.